History is a story written by men about men. Their tyrants are legendary, their cruelties catalogued as grand strategy. But in the shadows of their thrones, a different kind of power festered. A power that had to be twice as cunning, twice as ruthless, just to exist. We're not talking about misunderstood queens judged by a biased history. We're talking about the architects of atrocity who wore a crown. Women who didn't just inherit power but weaponized it, turning courtly intrigue into an assembly line of death and political maneuvering into performance art for terror. What you're about to learn will make you realize that the patriarchy didn't have a monopoly on evil. In fact, when a woman decided to break the rules, she didn't just bend them. She set them on fire. In 7th century China, a woman's path to power was through the bedroom. But for Wu Zetian, that was just the entry point. To become China's first and only female emperor, she understood something fundamental. To hold power, you couldn't just rule. You had to instill absolute, paralyzing fear. Her innovation wasn't conquest, it was the institutionalization of paranoia. Wu established a secret police force that would make the Stasi blush. They operated not from barracks, but from the gilded halls of the palace. Her agents weren't soldiers, they were informants, rivals, and even family members, all incentivized to report on one another. Her methods were a masterclass in psychological devastation. She is said to have smothered her own infant daughter, a calculated act of socio-political genius designed to frame a rival and clear her path to becoming empress. It was a message to the court: if my own child is a pawn, what chance do you have? But her true system of control was the invitation to confess. Accused officials would receive a polite summons. If they confessed to treason, whether they were guilty or not, they were granted a quick, clean death. If they maintained their innocence, they were handed over to her specialists in cruelty, who had perfected methods of torture designed not just to break the body, but to annihilate the spirit. Many of her own family members, including nephews and sons, were executed under her orders. Wu Zetian didn't just punish dissent, she preemptively murdered it. You don't learn this in history classes out there. She didn't just rule an empire, she curated a continent-sized prison of the mind. They called her Bloody Mary, but that name doesn't capture the sheer, systematic horror of her reign. It wasn't just bloodshed, it was faith weaponized into a public spectacle of agony. Mary I didn't see herself as a tyrant. She saw herself as a divine surgeon cutting the cancer of Protestantism from the soul of England. Her 5-year reign was a theological terror campaign. Nearly 300 people were burned at the stake. That's more than the Spanish Inquisition and the French courts combined during the same period. But it wasn't the number that was so devastating, it was the methodology. Burning at the stake was a deliberately inefficient form of execution. It was slow, it was excruciating, and the smell of burning human flesh would hang over the streets of English cities for days, a constant, putrid reminder of the Queen's power. It was state-sponsored terrorism with a religious justification. The most diabolical part? The heresy laws were a perfect trap. To recant your Protestant faith meant admitting you were a heretic all along, subjecting you to further punishment. To hold to your faith meant a guaranteed, agonizing death. It was a binary choice between damnation and immolation. Pregnant women were burned, their babies reportedly bursting from the flames, a level of cruelty that even horrified the 16th century. Mary wasn't just killing heretics. She was making an argument, written in fire and screams, that her God was the only one who mattered. Long before the Corleones, there was Agrippina the Younger. She was the sister of one emperor, the wife of another, and the mother of a third, the infamous Nero. She didn't just influence power, she was the architect of it, the puppeteer who treated the Roman Empire as her personal family business. And in this business, promotions were handled with poison. Agrippina was a master of political chemistry. When she wanted her son Nero on the throne, the current emperor, her husband Claudius, suddenly died after eating a plate of his favorite mushrooms. Historians agree it was likely a dish specially prepared by Agrippina, a perfectly executed, untraceable coup d'etat served for dinner. But her true genius was in creating a monster she thought she could control. She raised Nero, micromanaging his life and his reign, eliminating his rivals with cold, bureaucratic efficiency. When Nero's wife became an inconvenience, Agrippina allegedly had her poisoned. When his political advisors grew too powerful, they met with accidents. She was the shadow government, the true power behind the throne, operating with a ruthlessness that made seasoned Roman generals tremble. The ultimate irony: the monster she created eventually turned on her. Nero, tired of her control, decided to eliminate his own mother. But Agrippina, a connoisseur of poison, had spent years building up an immunity. So Nero resorted to cruder methods. He tried to have her drowned in a collapsible boat, but she swam to shore. Finally, he sent assassins. As they cornered her, she allegedly pointed to her womb and said, "Strike here," a final, defiant acknowledgement that she was the source of the very evil that was about to destroy her. It was a fitting end for the woman who had turned murder into a matter of imperial policy. Wu Zetian, Mary I, Agrippina. These weren't just evil women. They were innovators of cruelty, pioneers of psychological warfare, who operated within systems designed to exclude them. They remind us that the thirst for absolute power is not gendered. And they leave us with an uncomfortable truth. When we search for monsters in the pages of history, we often look for men holding a sword. Perhaps we should be looking for the women who sharpened the blade, mixed the poison, and understood that true terror isn't about the act of violence itself, but the horrifying, systematic logic behind it.